Morning. Morning, morning, morning. Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning. Morning. Good morning.
Morning, Professor. Professor?
Yes, I got your message, Carol.
Okay.
So I think, I'm going to talk to everybody about it because where did you put your goal setting?
So when doing it on my laptop, I had submitted twice, but then on the computer, I could only see my second submission. But once I go on my phone and actually go into the submission and rubric, I see both. So I was asking if I should just do it again and resubmit and put it all on one thing, or can you see both?
I think I'm going to have everybody email me their goal setting. Because I don't think that there was a way to submit it. I think that everybody's going to have to. Now I have yours because you submitted it. But we'll talk about it in a second because I think it'll affect everybody.
All right, no problem.
If they're using that kind of entry method. We talked about the fact that you could, even keep a notebook and scan it in. Like the whole concept is that you didn't have to do it any one particular way. So yeah, we'll talk about it today. There's so few of us. It's only about half of us today. Where is everybody? Good morning. Morning. We'll wait a few more minutes. We'll wait 2 more minutes and then we shall start. Can you believe we're halfway done? It's midterm. We are halfway done.
I know that went by really fast.
Actually, I kind of, when we're in the classroom, like there's so many fun things, especially this chapter would be totally fun if we were in the classroom. It's no fun on the computer because we can't do the fun games and things, but that's why I'm looking forward to going back to classroom. I mean, I don't mind walking into my bedroom to teach a classroom. The commute is pretty good, but there's like all the games we play. I miss playing the games. I think we have a game next week though. All right. One more minute. So we're halfway. Woo! I have to do midterm grades this week, which means that your journal is due. So chapters 1 through 7, I believe it's 1 through 7 of the journal is due as well, but it's actually 8 on entries because you had to do that goal setting. So what Carol and I figured out is that there's no real entry for goal setting the way it's set up right now. So I'm going to need to, if you used the posting within the within Canvas, then you'll need to email me your goal setting. If you are, you could use any format to do this journal. You could write in a notebook and scan it in. What you need to know is that it is due by Saturday at midnight. So you need to get me your journal. So it'll be 1 goal setting and 7 entries for each chapter. And if you remember, I think you have to write about 200 words and kind of discuss what was in that chapter that week. Now, I did take a quick look at the grade book, and very few of you have completed them all. So you have a lot. That's why you shouldn't wait till this week to do it, because now you're going to have a lot of work, because you've got all of your sensation and perception to do, and now you have to get all the journal done, and it is all due by Saturday. So it'll be 8 entries. It'll be your goal setting, and it'll be 1 through 7. You can't hand it in with the next grouping. When we, after this week, then you'll do 8 through 14 and your assessment of goal setting. So I cannot take, after this week, I can't take anything 1 through 7. So that's why it's super important that you do it and get it in. And it is due Saturday at midnight. So it has to be in my email Saturday by midnight. Does anybody have any questions about the journal entry?
I have
Just
a question.
oh,
Okay.
No, you can go.
the Canvas says the 20th. I thought they were all due next Saturday.
I think it's this one. Let's look. Go ahead, Hannah. What were you going to ask? We'll look. We'll be going there.
Is it okay to like submit it? Because I did it all throughout Google Docs. So is there like a way to upload all of them that way?
You'll have to, you can send it to me. You can send me your Google Doc, and that'll be absolutely fine.
To email you it?
Yep. I just have to have it in hand when I grade on Sunday. So however you send it, remember when we talked about it, we said, you have the opportunity to do it any way you want to. You could literally be writing in a notebook. Sky, you made it. You could be writing it in a notebook and then be scanning it in. Like, there was no demand on how you did the journal. You just had to do it, and you have to get it to me. Now, I'm pretty sure I saw, though, let me share my screen. Let's go to, I thought it was this week that it's due. Let's look. Yeah, this is midterm. So the goal setting plus weeks 1 through 7 are due. If not complete this week, they cannot be made up later. So they are due. If I'll check the dates, maybe the dates were wrong in the assignment, they are
Professor.
definitely due.
Yeah.
In the
They're
grade
all
book,
due
it says that they're all due the 20th.
Yeah, like on our modules, it says the 20th.
All right, I'll have to,
calendar, and all of them are due.
hold on, let me just look. So it's saying the 20th instead of the 13th?
Yeah.
Yep, March 20th,
All right.
2021.
I'll change it. I'll change it. It's due this week. Midterms are due this week. They are.
So it's not due the 20th.
It's not due the 20th. This is what I've been saying since 9:34. It is due today. And you know what? I don't see why anybody's getting worked up over it. You're supposed to be doing it every week. So you should only have your normal week to do this week that you would be normally doing, because you were told to do it every single week. So you should only have this week to do. You should have been doing it all along. So I will change that date in the assignments as soon as we get off. So this week it is sensation and perception. So you have your study plan, you have your quiz, and you have your discussion post in addition to your journal entry. I do not know why you guys do not complete the whole assignment. It is absolutely, I cannot figure out why you do not do all the parts of the assignment. You're losing very super easy points with not doing the complete assignment. When we do a discussion post, you have to write the prompt. In this case, it talks about sensation and perception, and you have to write your response, your post. Then you comment on 2 classmates, and then you go back and respond on yours. I cannot understand how many of you guys aren't doing it. It just makes no sense to me. No sense. Weird. Does anybody have anything to say about why they're not doing all the parts of it? Is there a reason?
No, this week I honestly forgot. So like when the points were taken off, I'm like, what did I do? But I realized I didn't reply to someone else.
Okay, well, fair enough if you forget. I just feel like that a majority of people just don't do it and they're just not getting their points. And it's the easiest way to help your grade.
I think everyone just forgets.
Yeah. All right. Well, try to remember, because it's, it's a super easy way to keep your grade up. Okay, so this is your assignment, and let's talk about sensation and perception, which is what this chapter is on today. Sensation and perception. So sensation comes from your what?
Your 5 senses.
And your 5 senses are associated with your what?
Your frontal lobe.
Well, good answer. Your frontal lobe is smell, which is a sensation, but you have sensory organs. So your nose is associated with smell, your ear is associated with hearing. Those are your sensory organs. So sensation is that you have receptors in your sensory organs that receive and detect stimuli. When you walk in someplace and there's a strong odor, you're not trying to smell that, but it happens. You're not, making a conscious effort. So sensation happens without even trying. So sensation is that the receptors in your sensory organs, and we're going to talk about your sensory organs, receive and detect stimuli. And perception is the way that your brain organizes that stimuli. And we're going to talk about how your brain organizes that stimuli. So sensation, receptors in your sensory organs receive and detect stimuli, and perception is the way the stimuli is organized and interpreted. So, for instance, you walk out of your house and automatically you smell the smell of something burning, okay? Now, you didn't try to smell it, it just happens. That's your sensation. In your brain, you organize that to say, something's on fire. The sensation doesn't tell you what. The perception is what you think about. Perception is thought. As you guys know, with perception, two people can perceive the same thing differently, right? You could be standing in a group of people and somebody could say something and one person takes it one way and one person takes it the other way. That's their own perception. So not everybody's perception is the same. So we collect information and we interpret it. That's what sensation and perception is. Sometimes you use what's called bottom-up processing, where you take little bits of pieces and put it together, sort of like a jigsaw puzzle. When you do a jigsaw puzzle, you might do the outside pieces first, and then you might take, like, let's say it's a puzzle of like 2 cats and a flower. So you might do the outside pieces, and then you might do the flower, and then you might do one of the cats, and then, so you put it all together. You're bottom up, you're taking bits and pieces and creating it. Or sometimes you process things top down, where you use past experience to interpret something. So if you've ever looked at one of those Where's Waldo books, the first time you're searching for Waldo. The next time you look at it, you're able to focus more because you already have that bit of information. So we process things a little bit differently, but everybody has what's known as an absolute threshold. And so when you were in elementary school, I don't know if you guys did those like eye tests and hearing tests, and they put like the sound, the headphones on your head, and they tell you to like tap when you heard the sound in which ear. They're looking for your threshold. So that's how they determine how you hear and how you see. So when you look at that eye test on the wall, and you're saying what letters you can see, that's your threshold. So that's your threshold of certain sensations. That's what they're looking at your sensations. Now, we also have sensory adaptation, where sometimes, even though there's some sort of really strong stimuli, you get used to it and you don't smell it or see it or taste it or hear it anymore. So you could walk into somebody's house and be like, oh my God, your dog stinks. And literally, you don't smell your dog at all because you're just so used to it. Or your room could be super messy, super messy, but you figured out how to step over things and you just don't see it anymore. But somebody else walking into your room is like, oh my God, the place is a mess. So sometimes you just become sensitive, like dripping faucets, you get used to it. Or maybe you live near a train track and you don't hear the train come by anymore. That's all your sensory adaptation. You can have subliminal stimuli. There was a Friends episode where Chandler wanted to stop smoking. And so he was using a tape that he listened to when he was sleeping. And it was like, you're a strong, confident woman. You can stop smoking. And so he was walking around as a strong, confident woman as he tried to stop smoking on the Friends episode. So yes, there is such a thing as subliminal stimuli, and stimuli is sensation. So let's get into your sensory organs. The first sensory organ is the eye. The eye is responsible for what? What's the sensation?
Sight.
Yep, or vision, yep. And we use the term 20/20 vision. What does 20/20 being the best vision mean? What does 20/20 mean?
I see at 20 feet what the average person sees at 20 feet.
Right. So something that is 20 feet away appears to be 20 feet away. So somebody who's legally blind, their vision is 20/200. That's the number that starts legally blind, being legally blind. So somebody who has legally blind sight sees something that is 20 feet away, it appears 200 feet away. So that's what the numbers mean. Light equals sight. So we talk about light when we talk about vision. When we talk about the sensation, we're talking about light, because we're looking at electromagnetic waves, and we're looking at color and brightness and things like that. So does anybody know what the outside of your eye is called? That transparent membrane that covers the eye and protects the eye? Does anybody know what it's called? Starts with a C.
It's not the cornea, right?
It is. The cornea is that transparent membrane covering the eye, and its main goal is to protect the eye, but it deals with focus. Does anybody know what the color of your eye is called?
The retina.
No?
Iris.
Iris. The color of your eye is the iris. And it's just basically that, the color of your eye. Then you have the pupil. And what's the main role of your pupil? You know, it dilates and constricts. So
It's
why
like
is it
focus light.
Exactly. So through the pupil, it is a reflex, which means that it happens automatically. It's a reflex. Your eye dilates and constricts to let light in or let light out, which is why you've heard of the term night blindness, people that can't drive at night. The reason they can't drive at night is because it's dark out, right? So their pupil is really big, but when a car is coming at them, their lights are really bright. So their pupil would have to constrict for that light. And then when the car passes, it has to open back up because it's dark again. And so people that have night blindness, the eye can't work fast enough to be able to see. So there's actually a time of blindness that goes on between seeing the light and not having any light again. So that's why people can't drive at night, when their eyes can't, the reflex isn't working to dilate and to constrict. So the lens is a super important part of your eye. That's behind the pupil, and that helps with the accommodation with the pupil. But most people know about the retina in the back of the eye, and the retina is where the transmitters, remember we were talking about in the sensory organs, every sensory organ has receptors that send information to the brain. In your eye, back by the retina. Let's get another color. This one didn't work. Your receptors in your eye are called rods and cones. Rods and cones. And the easy way to remember this is cones are for color. So what would rods be for? If cones are color, what are rods?
Light.
Not light, because all of sight is light, but good guess. Anyone?
Numbers.
What'd you say, Moaz?
Numbers.
Not numbers. It's way easier than that. If-
Black and white.
Say again, Anthony?
Is it black and white?
Yes. So if cones are color, rods are black and white. Okay? So cones are color, rods are black and white. And these are your these are for your ability to process. We're going to learn about receptor cells in all of your sensation, in all your sensory organs. So, does anybody know what nerve sends the information to your brain? Does anybody know what it's
The
called?
optic.
Yep, the optic nerve. I don't know if you're going to be able to see it. This pen does not want to work. The optic nerve is super duper important because it's the connection between the sensory organ, the eye, and the brain, the optic nerve. So when information goes in through the cornea, the pupil, the lens, and hits the retina, it does invert the way you always heard. You heard it's backwards and upside down. Yes, it does invert in the retina. But by the time it goes from the optic nerve to what lobe of the brain?
Occipital.
Yes, yes. When it gets to the occipital lobe, it is just a pattern of activity. It's not a picture back in the occipital lobe. It's just a pattern of activity. So let's talk about the term color blindness. Is anybody on this meeting colorblind? No one? None of the guys? Because it's way more common in guys than girls. 8% of men are colorblind, and less than 1% of women are colorblind. But the term colorblind there's like very hardly anybody in the world that's colorblind. Why? What would it mean to be colorblind? What
Do
would
you
it
mean unable
ahead.
unable to see colors besides, black, white, and the shades in between, like various grays?
Right. So, Lena, with that being said, that would mean you'd have to have no what in your eye?
Cones.
Correct. You would have to have no cones at all. Nobody is born with no cones. They might have weak cones. So really the term color blindness doesn't really make sense. It's color weakness. When we say the word colorblind, it really should be color weakness. So people that have color weakness usually have deficiencies in certain colors, like reds and greens look kind of yellowish brown. So you can see some color. Your world is not a black and white movie. That would be colorblind. So people who are color weak or color blind, as they're called, how do they drive? If I said that red and green look yellow, then a traffic light would look like yellow, 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 right? So how do they drive?
They just know the position of the light, right?
They know position, correct, but they also use what? Like, let's just say that somebody is very color weak and it looks yellow, yellow, yellow. How do they know?
Would it be different shades of yellow?
It's not different shades of yellow, but it has to do when it lights up, it'll be bright, so they know that there's placement, and then it actually whatever is lit at the time, they will know based on the brightness of the yellow if it's lit up. So people who are, color weak can drive. So there's there's lots and lots of stuff to learn about vision, but we're just going to touch on each of the sensory organs. But there is one thing that's really interesting, because we're going to go next into hearing, but there is, does anybody know what echolocation is? Bats use it, but so do people. What's echolocation?
When
I
sound
believe
bounces
it's-
off a wall.
Yeah,
When what?
basically.
Wait,
Like when sound bounces off a wall and
it is. It is. So people who are visually impaired use echolocation, and it's called blind sight. So somebody who is visually impaired will listen to the sounds that their cane makes if they're using a cane, which is why people tap their cane when they walk. They're not tapping for any other reason than to hear what's coming up. And if somebody walked into this room and they were using echolocation, let's say they weren't using a cane, they could make a sound, like they could just make a sound with their mouth, and based on what's in the room, they would know that there's a piece of furniture here and not walk into the furniture. It's really quite amazing if you've ever seen anybody with blind sight. It's very, very interesting. So being that we're talking about hearing, let's talk about the ear, which is hearing. And hearing is called something that you've heard of many a day. Hold on. It's called, another term for hearing is audition. Think about when you go for an audition, what happens? What's an audition? You're trying out for a show, you're trying out for a band, you're doing, maybe there's a poetry festival.
You get nervous
Well, no, what is it? What is an actual audition? When you go to an actual audition?
when you apply yourself to a position and see if you get accepted.
Okay,
Try
but
out.
an actual audition means that what are you doing?
You're like singing or doing something and they listen.
Right,
to you.
and that's the key word here. That's why an audition is called an audition and hearing is an audition. When you audition for something, you go for people to hear you. That's why audition, another word for hearing, is audition. Because when you are trying out for something and you audition, people are going to hear you. So when we talk about hearing, we're talking about sound waves. We talk about things like loudness, which is a word like amplitude is loudness. We talk about pitch, which is high and low when we talk about hearing. And Your hearing is two parts. On the outside of your ear, it's the movement of air, but when you go inside of your ear, it's the movement of fluid. So the ear has like two parts, air and fluid. Now this part of your ear, this outside cartilage part, that is called a pinna, Pinna. That's what Van Gogh cut off, his outer ear, pinna, Pinna. And that is how air enters the ear. That's the canal that allows the movement of air inside. And once you go inside the ear, you're inside the auditory canal, and the three tiniest bones in your body, so you should answer Jeopardy. The three tiniest bones of your body are actually inside your ear. So you have three tiny little bones in your ear, and then you have the eardrum. Now, does anybody know what kind of drum? You've seen those symphonies where somebody goes boom, 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 you know, on that big drum. Do you know what that drum is called? Starts with a T. Does anybody know?
Trombone.
No, a trombone is this thing. Starts with a T. It's a type of drum. I have no drummers in this class. It's called a timpani drum. So your eardrum inside your ear is the same thing as a timpani drum. And your eardrum is called a tympanic membrane, similar to that drum, the timpani drum, the tympanic membrane. And your eardrum is smack in the middle of your ear. And that's when it starts to move over to fluid, because it's air from the outer ear to the middle ear, and then it switches over after the eardrum and the tiny bones, ossicles in your ear, then it moves over to fluid. And the receptor cells in your ear are hair cells that actually move the fluid along. And they're moving the fluid to the nerve that attaches to the brain. Now we're talking about hearing. So what lobe of the brain are we talking about? Or shall I say lobes?
Temporal lobes.
Temporal lobes, right? So does anybody know what the nerve is called that sends the information to the temporal lobes? It's got to do with
Auditory.
hearing. Auditory, yes, the auditory nerve. I'll write that down. The auditory nerve is the nerve that sends that information to the brain. So when people have problems with hearing, a lot of the time it has to do with the auditory nerve. Now, if you never abused your hearing, you will have less than 40% of your hearing by age 65. Fact that you lose your hearing as you get older, but the more that you abuse it, the more that you lose it. Okay, so if you abuse your hearing, if you go to loud concerts or you work next to, you know, airplanes without protective hearing protection, you will have hearing loss. 1 in 5 teenagers at the teenage level already have hearing loss. 1 in 5. The earbuds being shoved right into your ear canal, that is not helping things. It is promoting hearing loss. Most of the time when people have hearing loss, it's a conduction deafness, which means that there is poor transfer of hearing from the outside ear to the inside ear. Very repairable with a what?
Hearing aid.
Right. What does a hearing aid do?
All I know, it just wraps around your ear and you put it inside your ear. It's like headphones, but it's not like headphones.
What does it, who knows what? What does it do?
Amplifies like sound waves.
No, it actually just amplifies it. It makes something louder from out here so that it gets inside. So it just amplifies it. That's what a hearing aid does. It just amplifies the sound. When you have damage to the auditory nerve, it's not as easy to repair. So we didn't talk about one of those tiny bones that we were talking about in your ear, the cochlea. Does anybody know what the cochlea does?
Does it vibrate?
Well, it does, but it helps move sound. The cochlea helps move the sound along. And so usually the cochlea and auditory nerve work in tandem. So when you have an issue with the auditory nerve or the cochlea, there is an operation that is a cochlear implant. And what they do is they literally embed behind your ear, they embed a microphone and a microprocessor. So you have a tiny little microprocessor and a microphone that processes the sound, and through electrical signals, it sends it to the auditory nerve and to the temporal lobes. So cochlea implants are controversial a little bit because the hearing community feels that you don't, I shouldn't say that, I'm sorry, the deaf community feels that you don't necessarily need an operation or a thing implanted on your brain, because there are ways to communicate without hearing, right? Sign language, which is a language just like any other language. I don't know, there used to be an MTV show called True Life, and a teenager got cochlear implants, and we grew up with sound and we learned how to desensitize to certain sounds. And this teenager at like 16 or 17 years old got the cochlear implants. They turned him on. He walked outside, just walked outside of the building, ran back in and asked them to take it off because it was too much. Think about if you walk outside of your house or wherever you are right now, think about the sound of trees, the sound of wind, the cars on the street, somebody putting out a garbage can, a truck is going over a bump. These are all things that we desensitize the sound to, and we don't even hear it anymore. But for somebody who's getting the sound for the first time, it's too much at one time. We grow with it. So cochlear implants are a little controversial. Our next sense we're going to do together. We're going to do two together. We're going to do smell and taste at the same time because they work together. They're both chemical senses and they work together. So smell and taste work together. They're chemical senses. And the word for smell is not smell, it's olfaction. And the word for taste is gustation. Those are the medical terms for smell. Smell is olfaction and taste is gustation. Now, these guys work together. let's talk about smell first. Which sensory organ is smell? Every one of
Nose.
you. Adrian, you keep answering. Let's go. Somebody, I'm going to ask you to turn on your cameras if Adrian and Carol and Lena are the only ones answering. So we got to answer people.
Your nose.
Yes, thank you.
welcome.
So your nose is smell. And what happens is your receptors in your nose are called olfactory nerve fibers. So you have these little like hairy things in your nose, and they respond to airborne molecules. So there are 1 trillion smells because there are different chemicals in the air and they make smells. So you have 1 trillion smells, and they're all based on airborne molecules. Your sensory fibers, when you smell something really, really harsh, like let's say a strong cleaning fluid, you actually will kill them, but they will regenerate. But as you get older, they don't regenerate the same way. The same thing with taste, gustation. Now, what are the receptor cells for taste? What are your receptor cells for taste?
Your taste buds.
Yep. Your taste buds are the receptor cells for gustation. Now, I don't know if your health teacher, when you were in high school, drew a tongue on the board and said, well, this part is for salty and this part is for sweet, and you know, drew a tongue on the board. That is not true. I'm not sure why they ever taught you guys that, because you have taste buds all over your tongue, the roof of your mouth, the linings of your cheeks. They are all over inside of your mouth, your taste buds. But they do respond to certain flavors. So going from least sensitive to most. So sweet is the least sensitive, then sweet, salty, sour, bitter, and the newest one, umami. Umami is savory. So from least to most is sweet, salty, sour, bitter, and umami. Umami is the one you are the most sensitive to, and it's like a savory. So just like smelling something strong that will kill your olfaction nerve fibers, the same go with your taste buds. They will, when you burn your mouth, when you take something super hot, they die, but they regenerate. So with a regular person, your taste buds regenerate about 8 to 12 days anyway. But if you burn them or take something really harsh, they'll die a lot quicker, obviously, instantaneously, and then regenerate. The older that you get, the taste buds slow down, which is why you might see your grandparents either putting salt to get more flavor, or maybe putting hot sauce on stuff just to get more flavor, because their taste buds aren't generating as quickly. And if you smoke or drink a lot, then they regenerate less quickly. So sometimes older people do lose a lot and don't regenerate. Now, we talked about taste and smell. being in conjunction. Does anybody know what anosmia is? This was on Jeopardy once. You'll be able to answer this question if you see it. Anybody know? What's anosmia?
It might be like forgetting how to taste or smell, I think.
Kind of close, Moaz. It's smell blindness. It's called smell blindness. So because you can't smell, you can't what?
Taste.
Right? Because they're connected. So somebody who has anosmia, my husband had a secretary when we lived in Connecticut who had anosmia. And she used to sit at her desk, and one day she'd eat an apple. The next day she'd eat a raw potato. Another day she'd eat a raw onion. Why? Because she can't taste it. So it's all about texture. Now think about it. An apple and a potato, very similar in texture, right? And if you think about an onion has a ton of texture because of the layers, right? So somebody who's looking for just texture, which is why when you guys get sick and your nose is stuffy, you can't taste things the same, right? Because they're definitely connected. All right, any questions so far about the sense organs that we've started with? Okay. Then let's keep going to touch. Your body's biggest organ. The biggest organ of your body is your skin, right? Epidermis. You guys know that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So when we talk about your skin or your epidermis, we're talking about the sensation of touch. So your sense of touch is very interesting for sending the information to your brain. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4. You have 5 types of the sensation of touch. You have light touch, pressure, hot, cold, and pain. You have 5 types of touch: light touch, pressure, hot, cold, and pain. Now remember, this is just the sensation. So you have these nerve fibers. Your nerve fibers send the information to your brain about all of these types of touch. But what's really interesting about touch is that you guys get warning systems based on touch. If you touch a hot stove, what happens when you accidentally touch a hot stove?
Your hand jumps back.
Right.
So
Exactly. Because it sent the information that you touched the stove and that you would hurt yourself. You would literally harm the skin if you didn't pull your hand back. So that information went from here to your brain, to your muscles, to not keep your hand on the hot stove, right? Because you could really hurt yourself. That's a warning system of the sensory organ touch. Now, when you have a toothache, let's just say, What does it feel like when you have a toothache?
Like something drilling into your teeth.
Okay, but is it always constant or is it sometimes a throb?
It's a throb and it like goes and comes.
Right, exactly. And so that is also a warning system that your sense of touch sends to your brain, because there's something going on with a tooth and it's going to get worse. And so it's kind of saying, warning, warning, you need to get this checked out. There's a problem. And if you don't check it out, it's going to get worse. So that is part of the sense of touch. Now, let's say that you're in a soccer game and you twist your ankle. You come out of the soccer game and you immediately do what for your ankle?
Ice it.
Right. So you've started with pain, right? And then you immediately ice it. And sometimes, most of the time when you're icing it, you're not really feeling the pain, right? Because the cold takes over for that sense of touch, right? So that's called sensory gating. When there's a sense and another sense takes over, it's sort of like the gate to your house. Like you close off the gate to your house so that the pain doesn't come in anymore. You only feel the cold. So that's called sensory gating. Control plays a role in how much you feel things. When you go to the dentist and the dentist says to you, okay, I'm going to work in your mouth, but if you feel anything, raise your hand and I'll stop right away. Having that control actually makes you feel less pain. So we're talking about, the reason that we talk about these things is because there's a whole psychology behind that, right? That just feeling that you have some control, you'll feel less pain, right? Since we're talking about psychology, you know that 50 to 80% of people that have limbs removed still feel pain. So if they don't have a limb, how do they feel pain?
I think it's called like phantom something, isn't
It
it?
is. It's called phantom pain. But
Okay.
why do people still feel pain in a limb that's not even there?
I'm pretty sure it's something to do with your brain. I don't remember
Right.
exactly. Yeah, it's something to do
But
with your
that's
brain.
exactly right. That's where you guys have to understand that even though we're talking about pain and this and that, we're talking about your brain. People feel pain because of their brain, not because of their limbs. If 50 to 80% of people have phantom pain when there's no limb there, that just proves that pain happens in your brain and not in your body. It's in your brain. So one of the biggest problems is for somebody who has pain insensitivity, because they can really hurt themselves. So a child who is born with pain insensitivity is somebody who has to wear goggles because they can't take the chance of poking their eye out, and they have to be checked constantly for broken limbs and things, because they're not gonna tell you that they twisted their ankle or broke their foot or broke their arm. So it's very dangerous when somebody has pain insensitivity. There's another sense that they don't really talk about, and that's kinesthesia. And kinesthesia has to do with movement. And so we find this sense strong with people that have a lot of movement in their daily life. So for instance, a dancer has this sense of movement, where her body needs to be. She can actually plan out where her body is and how they stand. They has this kinesthesia sense. So it's got to do with the nerves in the muscles and joints. So certain athletes have to do that too, to make sure that their position and movement is correct. So those, we've now done all of the sensation, the sensory organs. Does anybody have any questions about our sensory organs or sensation, about what we went over? So we know that sensation is the information that our sensory organs send to the brain. So what's perception? What did I say perception was?
What you feel.
Not what you feel. The sensory or information goes to the brain, and what is perception?
Your brain processing information.
The way, exactly, Moez. The way the brain organizes that information. Perception is the way that the brain organizes and interprets that sensory information. So, you guys have seen magic, right? And we know that magic is, I hate to burst anybody's bubble if they're on right now, but magic is an illusion. It means it's not real. Okay? That's perception. You see something with your eyes and it appears to disappear. It appears to come out of nowhere, but that's an illusion, and that's perception. Your eyes saw the information and the perception is that it's real, but it's not. When something isn't real, it's an illusion. It's inconsistent with the sensory data. It's not real. And in psychology, we talk about Gestalt. I don't know if you guys heard or know this word. It's very big in art. Gestalt is the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. You don't need to write that down, but just I want you to understand. Gestalt is the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So, in other words, if you took 3 notes out of a piece of music, you wouldn't have a piece of music. You just have 3 notes. But when those 3 notes go into a piece of music, it's a whole piece of music. Well, that goes with perception too. If you take little bits and pieces, you don't get the whole perception. So if you had, for instance, 3 people standing here and 1 person standing over there, you might have this perception of proximity, that these people are a group and this person is 1 person standing alone, when in reference, these could just be 3 strangers just standing close to each other. So what we see is not always what we get, is the whole point. So depth perception is a perception, right? What's depth perception? What's depth perception? Do you fall down the stairs? No, because you have depth perception. So what's depth perception?
How deep something is.
So you're able to judge distance and 3-dimensional space. And that's why you don't fall downstairs. You're able to perceive that there's a depth to that. That's a type, the sensory information comes in and the brain interprets it, that there are steps that have depth to it. when you watch a movie that is filmed on a train, is there really a train going by?
No.
No. What is it?
And like it's an illusion.
It's an illusion. There's a green screen behind the train that is perceiving movement, motion, but it sure looks like it when you're watching it. So all of that is the sensory information that comes through your eyes to your brain. You guys have what's known as a retinal disparity. Your eyes are like 1 to 1.5 inches apart. And so you have two sets of vision that is 1.5 inches apart when you look. Like you can see, hold your finger out, close one eye, then close the other eye. Your vision is an inch apart. So your eye, that vision needs to converge. So you have a visual convergence to make it one picture. Let's see. You don't just believe what you see. Sometimes we see what we believe. That's part of perception. So you can't make out your friend across campus who's coming out of Raritan Hall, but you know you have a friend who has a class in Raritan Hall. It's definitely a guy. You can tell that it's like a tall guy with brown hair, but you can't see that person. The person's carrying a backpack and your friend carries a backpack. So you use that guess that that person is your friend, not because you can see it, but because you believe what you think you can see. So we just don't believe what we see. Sometimes we see what we believe. Could be that guy, it might not be. There's shape constancy when we talk about perception. This looks like a pen, right? But if I hold the pen this way, you have to figure out if that's a pen based on the shape constancy, right? Very different than this, right? When you look at this, you have to figure that out. We use our experience to figure out our perceptions. So there is one type of perception that is very, very special. Who knows what ESP is? And I'll give you a hint. The last word is perception. What's ESP?
Extrasensory.
Yep. Extrasensory perception, which means it is not based on sensory information. ESP is what's known as parapsychology. That's what the study of ESP is called, parapsychology. And it is what's known as a psi phenomena. Extrasensory perception is a psi phenomena, which means it exists and it defies scientific law. So is there variables and is there deception with ESP sometimes? Yes, there is. But the point is that ESP does exist and it cannot be defined by scientific law. So there are three types of extrasensory perception. There's precognition, which means to predict the future. They have telepathy, which is to read another person's mind. And then there's clairvoyant, which means to see through barriers. So let's just, if we have a couple more minutes, we'll just talk about each of them. So precognition, predict the future. Would we have a lottery system if there were people that had, a lot of people that had precognition?
No.
Right. Because they'd predict the numbers. So we really wouldn't have a lottery system if precognition was something that was, pretty prevalent. But there are people that can predict the future. But again, I said to you, there is quite a bit of deception. If you go to the Middlesex County Fair and you pay $10 to have your future read, what's cap? Anthony, what's cap?
I have a question.
Oh, yes.
Do you really think that people could see the future?
Okay, I'm going to tell you a story because I was not a believer, and it's not in precognition, it's in telepathy. But let me tell you about precognition.
Okay.
So, if you went to Middlesex County Fair and paid $10 for somebody to read your future, okay, and they were trying to gain your trust, and they say, oh, I saw you had a car accident. Oh, wait, I see that you were in the hospital. Your medical records and your DMV records are on the internet. So most likely when you were paying $10 or $15 to get your future read, you waited, okay? And they had time to look you up so they could gain your trust by looking up on the internet some stuff about you. And then they're going to say to you, I see you, let's say you're a girl. Let's just say they say, I see your future husband. Your future husband has brown hair and brown eyes. Okay, that's what they say. So, I think it's like 75% of the population, male population, have brown hair and brown eyes, maybe even more. Okay, so you stack in the deck there. Then, if you really believe in that, then you guys go to the Sky Bar or wherever you go, and you're like looking for this guy with brown hair and brown eyes. The guy with blonde hair and blue eyes, says hello to you, and you're like, I'm looking for my future guy, so you make it work. You make it happen for yourself because you believe in it. Let's talk, but it's a proven fact that there are some people that have precognition. Telepathy, reading another person's mind. There's a kid named Tyler who connects to people who have died. There was a guy named John Edwards. Does anybody remember John Edwards, who did it for years and years? Does anybody remember him? No? So John Edwards, my friend Katie, who lives in Staten Island, wanted to be read, wanted a spirit to come through for her. And so she could only afford a nosebleed seat at the Nassau Coliseum. And so she was sitting in the top tier. And John Edwards said, I am having somebody come through to me. He's looking for somebody with the initials KT. So everybody in Nassau Coliseum that had the initials KT stood up. So let's just say there were probably 50 people with the initials KT. And John Edwards was saying things that would make people sit down. And so he finally got it down to 2 Catherines, and my Katie was one of them. And at this point, people are crying like it's amazing. And so she's up in the nosebleed, standing up. And John Edwards said, do either of you understand this? And he does this movement where he claps his hand and puts out his arms. And the woman sits down because it doesn't mean anything to her. And Katie is crying. And it's her grandfather. Her grandfather is coming through John Edwards, and her grandfather always used to leave the room by going, so she knew it was her. And John Edwards said, and remember, this is like 15 years ago. Okay. John Edwards says to her, your grandfather wants you to know that when your son is in the corner laughing, I'm entertaining him. Now, Katie has an autistic son named Max, who is nonverbal and had tons of behaviors. And one of his behaviors was to stand in the corner and laugh. There's no way that John Edwards would know it. It was long before you posted anything about your children, and you definitely wouldn't post on any sort of social media about your son standing in a corner and laughing. So does that answer your question, Anthony?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
There's just like no way to there's no way to refute that, unless one of you guys can think of a way to refute that. She's sitting in the nosebleed section of Nassau Coliseum, and he says that to her. How do you refute that? Right? Hello, anybody there? Am I right?
It's
Yeah.
impressive.
It's crazy, crazy. So it does exist. And the last one is called clairvoyance. And that's where you're able to see through physical barriers. And there was a show called Medium on, and you can still watch it. You could probably find it on like Hulu or something. And it was literally based, it was an actress named Rosanna Arquette, who was a medium. And she could find people that were lost or find dead bodies and things like that. And it was truly based on a woman who lived in Long Island. It was based on her life. So it was a true story. What?
I'm sorry, it has nothing to do with this, but like, if you don't mind me asking, when's your birthday?
July 23rd.
Okay, so you're a Leo. Okay,
Yep.
that's cool.
Yes, I am. I don't know. Am I a Leo? Like, am I acting like a Leo?
No, I can tell, like, you're one of those signs. I'm like, actually, like, I kind of like her. So
Thank you. Okay, so it is true. There was a clairvoyant who lived on Long Island, and she could find, the police would consult with her, and she could see through physical barriers, and she'd find missing children, and she'd help find bodies and stuff. And it's a true story. Now, it's so rare that these things exist, but it is a type of perception, but it cannot be explained by science. So that's your sensation and perception chapter. So you need to do your study plan, your quiz, your discussion post on sensation and perception. You need to do your journal entry, and then you have to get me your goal setting, and your journal entries 1 through 7 are due this Saturday. For those of you who joined late, it is due this Saturday, not next Saturday. I don't know how it got screwed up in the grade book, but I will change it right now. Any questions?
no.
If not, have a good week. Make sure you get all those journal entries in. It's a big percentage. It's instead of a final.
Have a good day.
Bye. Bye.